Hello, everyone. Welcome to Atlassian Governance Best Practices for our webinar series. My name is Bonnie Beyer, and let's see, we've got some attendees. Um, I'm an engagement director here at Valiantys, and just for some background, I worked for 22 years in avionics, doing the software engineering, systems engineering, engineering management, project management, back and forth to engineering management, project management. During the last 6 years of my time at that company, they threw me over the wall to shared services. And that is where I led the agile transformation and the Atlassian tools modernization activities. And I had so much fun doing that in 2019 I became a consultant so I could help other companies do that. And that's when I learned that I had it easy at my avionics company. The shared services, they were so mature in good governance, good IT governance over the systems. And when I started working with clients, I started finding out that that's not true for all companies. And so that became my soapbox. That's what I get up and preach about. You need to have good IT governance. And so that's what we're going to talk about today is what does effective IT governance look like and how do you get there? And so let's go ahead and jump in. Now, I'm going to have a little bit of a commercial here about Valiantys, but then we'll jump right into it. But yeah, Valiantys is the company I work for, and we are a Platinum Atlassian partner, 100% dedicated to Atlassian. We do all kinds of different work. Migrations are certainly a big chunk of it, but I personally love doing transformation work, helping people clean up their systems and come up with a good intentional design for their system. We also have a full stack of developers so that we can customize solutions for your company's unique requirements. And we are, I guess, Atlassian's number one global partner, or first global partner. So enough about Valiantys. Let's get into why you're here. So implementing governance. This is my agenda here, and I tend to go to the who, what, why, where, when kind of style of agendas. So we're going to start with what is governance? Why do we care about it? Who needs to be involved in it? How do you get started? And then I'm going to give you a demo of a good Atlassian governance board documentation space that would help pull all of the information together that you need to model good governance for your IT or Atlassian tools. And so let's jump right in. So what is governance? Well, Wikipedia defines it as the process of making and enforcing decisions within an organization or society. Well, I often have people call me into a sales call to talk about governance. And I'm like, well, when the client said something about governance, were they talking, what kind of governance were they talking about? Because governance without a qualifier is meaningless. We could be governing the federal government, we could be governing a state, a PTA, IT tools, our development practices. And so I have some examples there. In the engineering world, we have our development practices, configuration management, scope control, change control boards, or your IT tools, equipment and servers, things like that. But regardless of what you're governing, those three pillars of the people, process or practices, and tools are things that are going to be interrelated in everything you need to consider. So I consider these the best practices that I try to apply. I want to make sure that I have representative decision making. I want to have all pieces of the organization represented in that decision. So that way we're considering all aspects of how the organization operates. Hand in hand with that is I want to apply holistic systems thinking. I don't want to optimize for a small piece or just a single team. I want to optimize for the whole. People drive process, process drives tools. That is so critical. We don't want the tool making the decision for us because of some limitation. And sometimes there are limitations, even in the Atlassian tools. And that's why we sometimes have to develop something specific for the need. but we want the culture and the people and how they operate to drive the processes, because you want your process to be effective and efficient. And then you want that process to drive the tools. So that way it is effective and efficient and providing exactly what the people need. And then a critical one that gets overlooked so easily is that intentional change management. I like to follow the ADKAR model. If you don't remember the acronym right off the bat, let's see: awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. And so awareness is one that a lot of people get right before they do that migration. They send out an email: oh, we're migrating next weekend. That's not good change management, right? And so your communication planning, your enablement and support, all of that goes into that change management category. So why do we care about governance? And I'm not going to read this slide. It was written a long time ago, but we care about it because if you don't have a good design for your system, and you don't have people and their practices incorporated into how you design your system, you're not going to get all the benefits out of it. Atlassian has these fantastic demos at the Teams conference where they're showing we can do this and we can do that, and everybody's drooling. We love all these great bells and whistles and these project reports and these communication paths. And why can't we do that in our system? It typically is because there wasn't a good governance over their system, and it grew out of control. It became a wild, wild west. And that means that you can't get all those bells and whistles. You can't get all those good reports. You can't have that executive visibility for all of that scope and for all of that, the dependencies. And so your transparency and visibility of your operating model falls apart. And so that's why we care. It's a foundational aspect to everything we do, is to make sure that we have designed the system appropriately to get the end-to-end communication and visibility of what we're trying to accomplish as an organization. And so what does good look like when it comes to IT governance? And I've modified this over the years in my thinking, but it always comes back to these four domains. We need to have intentional, scalable systems design. You want to have that intentional design baked in, so that way, when I like to think of it as Rosie the robot. I want Rosie the robot to go cook my dinner and then clean up the kitchen afterwards. Well, if I don't have a good mapping in her system for where the produce is and where the canned goods are and where the dishes are and pans and how the dishwasher operates, if I don't give all that information to Rosie, I'm going to have one hell of a mess in my kitchen when she's done. So, and who knows what I'm going to be eating? It might be cardboard. So we got to have that intentionally design built in, so that way all of the automations, all of that great Rosie the robot type capability can actually operate properly. We got to have rigorous change management, because the people are the most important thing. So we need to make sure we're communicating properly for those people. We need to have a structured support model, and we need to have good enablement and training. And I tie that together with the knowledge base, because a lot of the enablement is in that knowledge base. And it's not just for the end users, it's also for the admins and the stakeholders. These are the things that form that structure that you need for scale. I've actually started a blog series on LinkedIn about governance, and I think, Kristen, you can put those links in the chat. One of them is about what does good governance look like, and one gets into more detail about intentional design. And I'm going to be writing some more blogs about governance in the future, but I just started in the last couple months. So, like I said, it's my soapbox. So this is right out of our Jira Hall of Fame. I love this workflow. Does it look familiar to you? Do you have one like that? Do any of these things sound familiar? These numbers are from our Jira Hall of Fame. 870 issue types. We saw that in one of our systems. 3,000 custom fields, 4,000 workflows, 2,600 statuses. Oh my goodness. 6,000 schemes and 295 Jira admins. Those numbers are a little old. I made this slide probably 2 or 3 years ago. So I think I have seen a system with more admins since that time. I think I saw one that had 400. And if that's the case, there's no governance. We know there's no governance when we see these kinds of numbers. And it doesn't. You don't have to have that bad of a system, though. But those are just some of our records. But really, your Jira configuration says a lot about the governance that your organization has. Do the projects have all their own issue type and workflow schemes? Are they all one-offs? Do you have several dozen issue types? Or do you have multiple versions of the done status, all meaning the same thing, like done, complete, closed, finished? I saw a done and a done just recently with one of my clients, and we were joking. Is it done, or is it done, or is it done? And we were all laughing our heads off. But the truth is they actually had it in the system that way. I see canceled with a single L, and I see canceled with two L's in the same system. And I think actually that's Atlassian's fault. I think they have a couple of JSM workflows in their templates that one of them has a single L and one of them has a double L. And then you never know which one you're really looking for. I see canceled and won't do. I see blocked and I see on hold. And I see all kinds of things that mean the same thing. Do you have several dozen resolution values? If you have more than just a handful, or even just two, then you probably have confusion as to why you're using them. People are picking the wrong ones, or they don't even care and they just select whichever is the first one on the list. And so if you're trying to do reporting on your resolution values, then you better make sure they're clean and well understood. Do you have hundreds of custom fields? I don't even say thousands, I say hundreds. Do you have hundreds of custom fields? If you do, that's probably a problem. Are the admins trained? Do they have experience? Do they understand what they're trying to accomplish with intentional design? I worked with a consultant once. He's no longer with the company. But he would go and create new projects with one-off configurations. And it was like, why are you doing that? Why aren't you following shared schemas with good governance? And he didn't know he was supposed to. So, of course, he didn't last very long. But it's very easy for Atlassian admins. They get in it and it's so user-friendly. And if they don't have the proper training or mentorship into the system, they don't realize that they're making a mess that they're going to have to clean up later, and it's painful. And that pain, of course, brings experience. So most of your most experienced Atlassian admins, they've made their own mistakes and they've learned from them. Are there several dozen people with admin permissions? We talked about that on a previous slide there. And so you have too many cooks in the kitchen. That's probably a problem. A lot of people like to give certain stakeholders or product owners over the system admin. And I say, no, give them admin in the sandbox. They don't need admin in production because the chances are they're going to do something that's going to be nasty. At my that avionics company, I can talk. I have a cold, by the way. At that avionics company I worked at, one of our plugin developers, he had admin access to production, and he accidentally upgraded script runner in production. And we had to run a huge cycle of testing over all of our custom developments, and it was quite a mess. Luckily, nothing broke. But people don't need to have admin permissions for the most part. And if they really do they need to have it in production or maybe just in sandbox? And so if you answered yes to any of these questions, then you probably need to evaluate your governance and look at how you can approach that. Some common challenges that the governance team is going to need to look at is that wild, wild west configuration. It's hard to prioritize cleaning it up, but it has end user impacts too, not just the admins. End users will see that when they're going to bulk edit or when they're trying to select a field in a filter or on a advanced plans or in structure or wherever they're trying to do that. If there's 5 different fields that mean pretty much the same thing, they don't know which one they need to use. Permissions and security issues. Definitely need to pay attention to your group management and making sure that access is appropriate. When I see 24 different roles, project roles in a system, I got to wonder, do they have a good handle on it? When the Active Directory groups or the Jira Atlassian groups are in the hundreds or thousands, there's reasons why that might happen, the syncing with the Active Directory groups. But you need to make sure that you have good obsessive anal admins looking over that so that you don't have a security breach. They need to look at those two items: end user training and end user support. Those are really critical aspects of governance, as well as the admin training. And then you need to think about your PMO and your agile support. Do you have your full end-to-end cycle process covered, or is it just for the development teams? Those are scope issues. If your Atlassian system is just for the development teams, that's fine and dandy. But more and more organizations are going to end-to-end life cycle in their Atlassian systems. And so the governance team needs to consider all of those. All right, so who's involved? How do we get started? Well, we got to get started by deciding who's going to be on our governance board. And really, that means you need to have somebody who's the product owner. A product owner and you can title that the executive champion, you can title that the scrum master, whatever you want to call that role. It's the person that's going to be ultimately responsible for the success of the governance team, and it's going to have final decision-making authority when you can't come to consensus. You're going to want to have your admins. They need to be involved. If you have a very large admin team for a very large system, then you're going to have representatives at least, or key admins that are involved in the governance board, as well as some people that are from the other integration systems, like your security admins and your Microsoft Teams, your infrastructure. All of those admins will be called in as needed. And then you're going to want to have somewhere around half a dozen to a dozen engaged representatives of the end users. And those could be project managers or scrum masters or lead developers. So they're going to be your subject matter experts, your power users, who represent what do we need to get out of the system. What are they going to work on? Well, first they're going to start with the vision and goals and the practices of how the governance board operates. And that's going to include what is the scope of our responsibility and what are our support models. By scope of responsibility, exactly which tools are we responsible for governing? And what is our scope of responsibility when it comes to support and enablement? And who are our partners in that? Do we have an LMS organization that's going to be providing the training? And how much do we need to interact with them and support them? Then they're going to work on, once they establish their operating practices and their scope, they're going to start implementing what does that support system look like? And what is our Jira architecture? When you think about your Jira architecture, can you say unequivocally, this is our hierarchy, and these are our project categories, or our space categories now, they're called spaces. If you don't have a well-defined topology of your data in the system, Rosie the robot, like I said, can't really operate effectively. So having these different project categories defined that are using shared schemes will help you define what that data topology looks like. And after they've built out that intentional design, they baseline it, then they implement it, get everybody converted over to it. At that point, they just really need to meet monthly to review the change requests and what are the maintenance activities and what are the user support things that are coming in. There's been lots of different support tickets on this particular issue. How do we address that? And then if you're in data center, you got to worry about upgrades. Or if you're in the cloud environment, but you need to consider upgrade verification activities. Some companies have to actually do verification on the upgrades, even as in the cloud. And then when the change requests come in, the board members then need to collaboratively consider all aspects of the change. I like to say there's no such thing as a free plugin. A lot of people think, oh, it's free. Let's just go ahead and give it a try. And they throw it into the production environment. There's no such thing as a free lunch because not only do you now have this in the system, you have to train people on it or at least have a knowledge base so that they can learn how to use it. You need to support it. A lot of plugins, especially the free ones, it seems, introduce configuration into your system and you don't even know. So always, always, always install it in your sandbox first and look and see what kind of configuration changes it might have made. Play with it there. Think about what you need to train, what you need to provide for support on that before even thinking about putting it into production. So that change control board or governance board or steering committee or whatever you want to call them, they need to consider all of those aspects of the change before they approve it. So how do we get started? Like I said, the first thing we need to do is set our goals, our vision, and our purpose. And these are just some examples, but right in the center of that image, what we show there in those little ovals is the goal, the components of what we're governing. And it might be our Jira site and our Confluence and our Bitbucket. It might be our knowledge management, or it might be our best practices documentation. Whatever it is, you need to define that scope. And then what are our goals? We want to have scalable growth, visible control, user ownership, and knowledge sharing. And your goals might be different. You might think about that in different ways. So one of my colleagues a long time ago wrote those 4 goals, but they might be scalable growth and end-to-end life cycle support. There's lots of different things you might think about there. Then you want to define what is our vision and what is our purpose. And the vision here, ensuring an ongoing balance between enterprise goals and enterprise growth via flexible controls managed by the employees who best understand the purpose and value of the Atlassian products across the organization. The key word there, of course, is underlined, balance. And there's often a lot of fear over the word standards when we think about making a standardized system. What does that mean? It sounds constrained that we're not going to be able to have our development lifecycle supported properly by our workflows. That is not the intent of standards and governance. The intent is to strike that balance and find the right project categories for all of the different ways that we operate in the organization. And then, of course, our purpose is to support that, support the creation and the discussion, the decision-making, and the implementation. And so when you start out, that's where you start. Step back and do some of that deep thinking first about what are we trying to accomplish. But then you get to the fun stuff. You start thinking about our architecture. And one of the easiest and most important steps is what is our layers of scale? What is our hierarchy? And how do we lay out our data in that system? These are just some examples of how some organizations do it. In particular, options 2 and option 3, those happen to be drawn up for a company that was trying to integrate with Jira Align. And so those were the 2 options that made the most sense for integrating with Jira Align. Often I see a mix where one project is set up and it has all layers of scale, and another project, they have multiple layers of scale in different projects. And so if that's the case, I'm sure Rosie the robot is really getting very confused. So you want to select how do our layers of scale lay into our Jira spaces, and how do they interact that way? There are advantages to having them all in the same project, but there's also cons. Those pros and cons need to be weighed off and thought about. What is our scope of responsibility? What is our Jira configuration structure? What are our program and portfolio requirements? Those requirements are going to drive some ideation, and potentially you already have some requirements in play as to what PPM or SPM solutions you need to integrate with. Are you happy with just advanced plans? Maybe you have some easy agile or big picture or tempo products, or Jira line, or part of the enterprise strategy collection from Atlassian. There's lots of different options. I'm a big fan of some of those options. I love the tempo products. I'm a big fan of Easy Agile. All of those plans is really coming along in cloud. I'm really liking plans quite a bit at this point. And with Atlassian focusing in on capacity planning, they're really building up a strong solution there. So, but you need to think about what those requirements are, because some of those tools are going to impact some of that decision making that you're going to have when you're defining your data topology and your configurations. And then what are the team level customizations? What are the team level integrations? Are we integrating with SAP? Are we integrating with Salesforce? Are we integrating with Bitbucket and GitHub and GitLab? And what are their custom integrations do we have? I've seen some interesting ones, Accolade. And of course, you have testing solutions like X-Ray or Zephyr, or I can't think of all of them. There's so many different integrations that you and plugins that you'll want to be thinking about there. And then governance must be documented. So how many of you have admins, multiple admins on the team that have run books that are on a SharePoint here? Maybe some are on a hard drive over there. There's some knowledge-based documentation that's owned by Sally, who provides a bunch of training, and she's got that all on her hard drive, except for a few items that are in a Confluence knowledge base. And they're scattered all over the place. Oh, and that big upgrade that you're planning for this custom solution you have, that's all in Tommy's head. But I know that Tommy, the admin, he is actually playing the lottery every day. And he just won the lottery. He's out the door. And all of that documentation that was in his head is lost to the company. So you want to make sure you have all of your documentation in a central repository. So that way you can survive the lottery, as well as promotions and all of the different reasons why people might leave. And so I had this Atlassian Governance Confluence space, and I was going to go ahead and pull that up in a demo. If you haven't noticed by now, I'm actually presenting in Confluence. It's pretty slick. It's taking over. We don't need to use slides anymore. So I'm going to put that in full screen view and jump over to my Atlassian Governance space. And so I built this over the years. We actually insert this Confluence space into a lot of our clients' environments when we start working with them. It's not perfect. I'm not going to say it's perfect, but I think it's a good starting point, especially if you do have things scattered all over the place. And I've broken it down into three main categories. We have the knowledge base, Atlassian administration, and governance practices. And you might want to have this in SharePoint. You might want to have this to be one space, and this to be another space, and this to be another space in your Confluence. Maybe that's a really common, actually, is for the knowledge base to be its own user guide Confluence space. But I have it all in one space right here, broken down that way. And I'll start with the knowledge base because this one's the easiest one. Really, what I want to have in here is there's going to be a Jira configuration section. And that doesn't mean that I'm capturing everything about the configuration. I mean, why would you do that? That would be silly. But what I am capturing is just enough information that the end users need to know. Like, what are the different project categories that we have? And when we have a project category, how do we define it? So in this example, I have an enterprise project template. And this is for portfolio and enterprise leadership to track themes and initiatives. And so I've given enough information about this is the issue type scheme and workflow schemes that are associated with it. So they know exactly what they're getting and any of the workflow details, any of the other information. So this is kind of a handoff communication. You might have a team project category. You might have a program project category. You might have project categories that are one for development teams, one for hardware teams, one for this special integrated with this special tool team, and then one for shared services teams. And that may be all the project categories you need. But whatever they are, you want to have them captured here in this Jira configuration section. And then I also like to provide an area for all of the Atlassian documentation and videos. Maybe I just provide the link to the YouTube here and to their documentation set, but there might be specific pages or videos that I want to make sure are captured for my company, so I can add them here. And then Jira best practices and Confluence best practices. And this isn't so that I'm recreating the wheel. I don't want to recreate all of the documentation that Tempo and Atlassian and AppFire and all of the vendors are providing. They're doing that. They're maintaining that. You don't want to maintain that, especially in the cloud, because things change constantly. But what you do want to maintain and what you do want to capture is your company specific practices, like how do we do our sprint naming conventions? How do we set up our advanced plans for our PMO reviews? What are the Confluence templates that we've built out for specific activities, for maybe for engineering estimates or for proposals that we write for our clients? What is our labels taxonomy? All of those different company-specific decisions and documentation associated with those would go in there. So that's what you want in your knowledge base. A long time ago, like I said at that previous company, we tried to recreate all of that Atlassian documentation for our end users. What a waste of time. And it's all out of date. It all went out of date, within a year, do our next upgrade and everything changes. That was data center. Now in the cloud, it's even worse. There's no way you can maintain that. So don't try. Then we have our Atlassian administration section. In here, I've got my naming conventions. What are our different naming conventions for our project categories? Maybe we want to have naming conventions associated with all of our configuration items. That way, there's some sort of clue to the admins 5 years down the road as to what these different schemes mean. If you're integrated with Jira Align, for example, make sure you have JA or Jira Align in the naming convention for those projects that are actually scoped to integrate with Jira Align. Then you're also going to have your run books. And this would be run books for the common activities, so that way you can hand them off to that tier 1 support. And they're also going to be run books for the big upgrade that you're going to be doing for something, or for that migration, or for a deployment of a new functionality. Those run books are important that you're capturing them so that everybody has done it once in Sandbox, they've verified it, and now they repeat it exactly the same way in production. So run books are very helpful for configuration changes, conversion of project schemas, all of those types of things. They'll all be in this area, historical run books and common activities. We're going to have our change request process. How do we, and our change communication process. Then we're also going to have our maintenance activities. And that might include our yearly housekeeping activities. What are the different things that we want to do each year? I worked with a company that, they use Tempo timesheets. And so they have to update all of their admin tickets for their time charging activities every year. So that goes in their housekeeping activities. I worked with another company that was using a PI field for planning increments. And the planning increment field, the options for that, some of them would have to be, every year they'd have to disable some of the old options, and they'd have to create new ones and enable them. So those kinds of custom field updates that need to be made. Whatever your yearly housekeeping is, along with whatever cleanup activities, those should go in there. What are our Sandbox updates? How often do we do those, and how do we take care of those? And various other little maintenance activities that you would want to have. So this would be your administration section. So right there, if you have a whole bunch of admin stuff that's scattered all over the place, try to bring it all together into a single location. And then our governance practices. And this is the meat. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. So I'll start. You might want to have your communication model defined. That communication model might say, for this change impact, we need to do pre-communication 1 month out, and we need to do pre-communication 1 week out, and then we need to do communication day of, and then we need to do a follow-up communication the week after. But for this kind of change, we only need to do a communication day of. And who are the end users, or who's the audience for these communications? And what is the medium? Are we sending this communication by email? Are we doing announcement banners? Are we, what kind of communications are we sending? So that communication model should be defined. And our enablement training model. And it might be as simple as saying, we provide this knowledge base, these videos, and we send them to Valiantys for this kind of user training, or we use this LinkedIn training model, or whatever it is, but document that. And then our support model. How do we do support? Are we using JSM? Are we using ServiceNow? Are we doing emails or Slack chats? I hope not. So whatever your support model is, you would want to define that. And your change request process. How do people make change requests? And then the decision log. Now, this decision log is pretty long. And so this decision log is actually built using the DASI decision model. So if I were to hit this button, this is the DASI decision template that I used. It's not perfect, but it works. And so what you want to do is, if you were designing a Jira system from scratch and Confluence, or if you're trying to design your future state, you can ignore your current state. You're going to have to convert to it eventually. But right now, let's just design our future state. What are our product access groups, and how do they interact with the system? What is our Jira hierarchy? And so each decision page, we would capture the background information. We'd think about what are the different options that we're considering. And then we'd actually have some discussion about it. The governance board would take action items if there's any investigation, and then they'd capture the outcome. And that outcome, of course, could then also go up here on the decision that's made, and the impact or the status is now complete. What is our project category structure? How many different project categories? What are our program and team project categories? Like I said, maybe hardware, software, business teams, shared services. Maybe JSM, you want to have certain project categories there. What are our workflow starting and ending practices? I'm a big fan of having a single starting status that's the same in all workflows, and a dual ending status for all workflows. Now, some people use done and won't do, or complete and won't do, backlog instead of draft, or open, or whatever you're using, because draft actually, I've learned since this diagram was created, a lot of people use draft as a in progress for documentation type work. So in draft or draft means something different, so they use open instead. But having a single common status and a dual ending status makes it so that you're reporting in your extended tools that are rolling up the work so easy to see complete and canceled as done. Whereas otherwise, if you've got 20 different ending statuses, really all you can do is look at the status category, and then you got to hope that the resolutions are correct so that you can eliminate the ones that weren't completed. Or you have to list out 5 different statuses and say status in these 7 different complete statuses to get this kind of progress. And that's just wonky, right? Your global configuration settings, Jira look and feel, Confluence look and feel, all those different decisions that you're making, all of your issue type schemes, or they're now called work item types, and your workflow schemes for all of your different project categories, and your field configuration schemes. And then your migration plan or transition to move everybody from those previous Wild Wild West into those structured project categories. So that is how this decision log operates. And then, of course, we have our Confluence implementation best practices and Jira implementation best practices. These are just things that we've learned over the years, captured just as to help inform and guide the governance team, especially when some of those governance board members aren't admins and aren't experienced in admin. So you want to make sure that they understand what you're trying to achieve. So that is the Atlassian governance space that we use when we work with a client. All right. So I will finish up this and then I'll be taking your questions. So feel free to put questions in. I see one question in there. I'll get to that in a moment, but let's wrap up this part of the webinar here. And so one of the things I'll say is that data is the new gold. And it's not that new really anymore. And this kind of old quote, but data is the oil. Some say the gold of the 21st century. It's the raw material that our economies, societies, and democracies are increasingly being built on. I've heard it said many times, when you get a free product like Facebook or X or whatever, it's not free. The price you're paying is your information and your interaction with the system and all the information that provides. So data is definitely critical. And the fact of the matter is that in our systems, maybe only 20% of our data really actually gets accessed properly because of the wild, wild west. What we want to have is visibility so that we can see across the entire organization what work is being done. We want to get insights on how what opportunities there are to unlock, and how are we progressing on our work, and do we have duplicated efforts? How often does that happen, where one team's working on something and another team's working on something, and then you find out, oh, we've been working on almost the same thing, and really we can't deploy both of them because they both conflict. So yeah, that's a problem, right? And then consistency. We want to make sure that our decision makers are able to make good decisions and have reliable data on which to make those decisions. And so we do have at Valiantys access to governance. And so, of course, there's this webinar. One of our primary values is to make every interaction excellent. And so we give a lot of free trainings in these webinars, not just on governance, but we have webinars on lots of automations or on Rovo or on Jira Align or on Tempo products. We have lots of different webinars in our YouTube channel, so feel free to go look at those. We do this governance webinar 4 times a year, and we have several others that we do regularly, as well as one-offs that we do now and then just for a special topic. For governance also, we do have a 1-day hands-on training. Ideally, that's done with your governance board. Maybe you have your 10 or 15 people already lined up and I want to start our governance board. We can help kick you off with that workshop. And then we have our governance engagements. Lately, we've really been leaning into something called the Governance Transformation Assessment. And that's where we'll spend 2 to 4 months, 2 months for a single site. But I've recently worked with a company that had over a dozen different Atlassian sites. And that would take 3 or more months, where we actually go in and I call it the forensic analysis of their systems to understand where they're at. And we also do interviews with all the stakeholders. We look for their end-to-end process, where there's gaps, where there's overlap, and we build out a roadmap in our recommendations. And we also do an ROI analysis in a spreadsheet, so that way they can explain to the money holders, this is why we need to accomplish this, and what kind of return on investment they can expect. So, and our final couple slides here are just more of the commercials. But what makes us stand out? Well, it's because we are committed to value, always trying to provide value in every interaction. And we are customer centric. And you get access to people like me who have a lot of experience in the industry, as well as people like colleagues like Dietmar, who's not here today, but Dietmar is JSM strength extraordinaire. And we have people like Vicky, who knows everything about the enterprise strategy collection. And we have we have generalists who know little bit about everything and can then poke on all these different experts. When you work with us, access to one person who is your primary point of contact or a team, depending on how big the contract is. But all of those people have a couple hundred or more people behind them that they are relying on for expertise as well. So we're always learning from each other. And so, again, these are the types of things that we do. We of course, will consult with you. We do provide licensing with a discount to the Atlassian products. We do have a custom development and integration team, managed services, and training. And so feel free to reach out if you're interested in any of those. But I'm going to go ahead and jump ahead and look at some of the questions here. So let's see. So our mess looks like a pot of spaghetti. So you like that? Do you like that? Does it look like this workflow up here? I I love this workflow. I actually, when I worked with that avionics company, I probably shouldn't name names of companies, but we had a North America business unit, and then we also had a European business unit. And we were looking at the Atlassian site that the European business unit set up, and they had a workflow that looked just as crazy as this. And it was because they were using every single status. They were using the screens in the transitions as a way to enter data. So when it was like, enter this information, then enter this information. So they were using their workflow in a really weird way. So we had to stop them pretty quickly on that one. But yeah, if it looks like a pot of spaghetti, you probably want to evaluate how to clean that up. Will we get a template of this Confluence space after the training? After the webinar, no, we don't provide that out as for free. But we do provide that as part of that one-day workshop training. And then I typically provide it on any engagement I'm on, whether it's a governance engagement or otherwise. Some customers latch onto it and really find the value. And some customers, especially if it's just a go help us with this implementation, we don't really get into the governance conversations except for with regards to that point solution. So they don't really latch onto it, but I still like to provide it as a free asset because I live on this soapbox and I'm always preaching on governance. So any other questions we have, feel free to put them in the chat. One question I often get asked is, what are the two biggest obstacles, or what are the biggest obstacles you see towards governance? And I say my response is there's two of them. One of them is authority, and the other is engagement. And so you have to have your governance board, they have to have the authority to make the decisions because change is hard. And sometimes you're going to have to say no. And so they have to have the authority to make those decisions. I wasn't very popular at one point when I was at my previous company, and we were trying to explain why we couldn't have a custom workflow for every different team. Instead, we were operating on 4 different templates, and so they had the 4 different templates to choose from, and they didn't like that. They wanted a custom workflow. And they were trying to go around us to their executive leadership. And thankfully, I had the ears of the executive leadership because they were engineering managers back when I was an engineering manager, and we grew up together. And they went this way, and I went this way. And so I was able to explain to them exactly what I'm explaining to you. If you want to get the value out of the system so that you're having your reports, you have to sometimes make the difficult no answers. And the other one is the engagement. If people are not actually participating in the governance activities, if they're not trying to understand why this decision making is happening, if they're not coming to the meetings, if they're not reviewing the materials, then you're going to have trouble getting to decisions. People are sometimes afraid to make a decision because they're afraid to make the wrong decision. And in that case, it's like, well, analysis by paralysis isn't going to help us either. So we have to make a decision and move on. And sometimes we have to pivot. There was a company I worked with, and I will say this company, I worked with Tempo products. If any of you have Tempo uh, structure or timesheets or capacity planner or portfolio manager or roadmonk, any of those products, a lot of those products came together from acquisitions. And so I actually worked with that company because they were struggling to have a single common way of working. And they also had all these different systems coming together, and they had a wild, wild west. And so they came to Valiantys, and I led them through a ways of working workshop where we actually defined, okay, how are we going to operate as an organization? What is our common process that we operate on? And now, what is our Jira system supposed to look like to support that? So we worked through that. I actually wrote a white paper on that. Kristen, can you put those links in the chat? Um, we invited Tempo actually to this governance webinar. Oh, I don't know. I guess it's been 2 years now. And so that webinar, we interviewed them after that engagement to see how things were going, and it was going outstanding at that point. So we were really happy for them. But you got to have that engagement, and you got to have the authority. And if you don't have the process defined, the tools aren't going to help you. So you got to start with the people and the process, and then go to the tools. All right. Well, if we don't have any more questions, I think I've covered everything in this webinar, and I just wanted to thank you all for attending. If you ever want to reach out and ask any questions, feel free to reach out. My email, I think, has been put in the chat, or feel free to reach out on LinkedIn. I get messages there too. So you have a great rest of your Thursday, and I will talk with you soon. Thanks.